How the Bedouins outsmarted the desert's deadly heat. You think 35 degrees feels unbearable. Try 50. No air conditioner, no running water, no shade, just endless sand that burns like metal and a sun that never forgives. Most people wouldn't last a day, but the Bedouins did more than survive. They mastered the desert. For centuries, they walked through some of the hottest places on Earth without collapsing, without modern tools, and without fear. Their secret? Knowledge so precise, it turned nature's cruelty into an ally. They didn't fight the heat. They learned to live with it. And the things they discovered, from the way they dressed to how they breathed, are so ingenious that modern science is still catching up. So how did they do it? How did a people surrounded by fire manage to stay cool, calm, and alive? Let's uncover how the Bedouins outsmarted the desert itself. The desert doesn't forgive. The desert doesn't care who you are. It doesn't matter if you're strong, rich, or prepared. Once the sun rises, it owns you. By mid-morning, the ground can sear through your shoes. By noon, the air itself feels alive, like it's burning your lungs from the inside. There's no mercy here, no trees, no rivers, no escape. And yet, this is where the Bedouins chose to live. Not for a week, not for a season, but for generations they roamed across Arabia, North Africa, and the Sinai, carrying everything they owned on the backs of their camels. While outsiders saw the desert as death, the Bedouins saw it as home. They didn't run from the heat. They studied it. They watched how the wind shifted at sunrise, how the sand cooled at night, how every shadow, every dune, every breeze carried a clue for survival. Where others built walls, the Bedouins built understanding. They realized something that seems impossible to most of us today. The desert isn't the enemy, it's a teacher. And its first lesson: you don't win by fighting nature. You survive by becoming part of it. The secret of the black robes. You'd think wearing black in the desert is a death wish. Under a sun that can boil water, it sounds insane. But that's exactly what the Bedouins did. And it saved their lives. Their clothing wasn't fashion. It was engineering. Every fold, every layer, every thread had a purpose. At first glance, their robes, the abaya, look heavy, thick, and suffocating. But that's the trick. The robes hang loosely, never touching the skin. That space between fabric and body becomes a cooling chamber. Air moves in, heat rises out. It's like wearing your own portable shade. And the color, that black fabric, isn't a mistake. Research from modern universities shows that black heats up faster on the outside. But that heat actually pulls air upward, creating convection that draws warmth away from the body. The result: the hotter it gets outside, the more efficiently it cools inside. Even the keffiyeh, the cloth wrapped around their head and face, wasn't just protection from sand. It filtered the air, trapping moisture from their breath, keeping it cool before it entered their lungs. Every inhale was softened, every exhale recycled, and when the heat hit its peak, they took the principle one step further. They moistened the inner layers of their robes with tiny amounts of water. As it evaporated, it cooled the body, the same science behind modern air coolers, perfected centuries ago. In the desert, bare skin is a liability. Exposed flesh loses moisture in seconds, and water is survival itself. The Bedouins understood. If you keep your sweat, you keep your life. So they covered everything, even their lips, even their breath. Not out of tradition, but out of necessity. Their clothing wasn't armor. It was intelligence woven into fabric. The Bedouins didn't just survive the heat, they wore the solution on their backs. But staying cool wasn't just about what they wore. It was also about where they lived, and their homes held secrets. Even modern architects are still learning the miracle tent. In the middle of a landscape that melts metal, the Bedouins built homes that breathed. No bricks, no glass, no electricity, just goat hair, rope, and genius. Their tents, called Beit al-Sha'ar, or House of Hair, were woven by hand from thick goat wool. And that wool did something extraordinary. When dry, it let air pass through freely. But when the air grew damp, from morning dew or a passing breeze, the fibers swelled, sealing in coolness. A living, breathing material that changed with the desert. During the day, that same moisture evaporated under the sun, cooling the air inside by up to 10 degrees. At night, the fabric held the warmth, keeping the cold wind at bay. One simple structure, a tent, acted like both an air conditioner and a heater, perfectly tuned to the desert's rhythm. But design was only part of the magic. The Bedouins chose their spots with surgical precision. They'd set up in shallow dips near dunes, places that caught the soft morning shade and gentle northern breeze. The entrance always faced away from the harshest winds, and the side walls could be lifted to let the air flow through. Inside, the layout was as strategic as the engineering. The center often dipped into a shallow pit, lined with rugs, a natural cellar where food and water stayed cool. Even when the world outside baked at 45 degrees Celsius, the ground beneath their feet held steady near 25 degrees Celsius. They didn't need machines. They had the earth itself. And when the seasons shifted, so did the home. In summer, walls lifted. In winter, they dropped to the ground and sealed tight. A fire in the center turned the same space into a warm cocoon. When it was time to move on, the whole structure could be packed up in half an hour and rebuilt miles away. Every thread of that tent carried generations of learning. How to stay cool, stay mobile, and stay alive. They weren't just shelters. They were masterpieces of adaptation, passed down like heirlooms. But even the smartest shelter couldn't protect you from the desert all day. To survive, the Bedouins had to reshape time itself, learning when to move, when to rest, and when even breathing too much could cost you your life, the rhythm of survival. In the desert, time doesn't follow the clock. It follows the sun. Every minute matters. Every shadow means something. And for the Bedouins, knowing when to move or when to stop wasn't a choice. It was survival. By sunrise, the heat is already building. By 9 a.m., the sand burns bare feet. By noon, it's a furnace. At that point, even speaking too much can drain the body. So they adapted in the only way possible. They stopped. When the sun hit its highest point, everything went silent. No travel, no cooking, no talking, not even thinking too hard. They lay in the shade, wrapped in blankets, conserving every breath, every movement, every word, every thought. It all costs moisture. And in the desert, moisture is currency. Then as the sun began to fade, the desert awakened again. By evening, life returned. Fires were lit, stories were told, and the main meal, small but nourishing, was shared under a cooling sky. Their nights weren't for rest. They were for motion. The Bedouins traveled under moonlight when the air softened and the ground no longer burned. They followed the stars instead of the roads, shadows instead of straight lines. Speed didn't matter. Heat avoidance did. Their bodies became clocks. They could feel time in the chill of the wind, in the warmth of the sand beneath their fingers. No alarms, no watches, just instinct, tuned perfectly to the desert's heartbeat. Even their animals were part of this rhythm. A camel's breath could warn of rising heat long before humans felt it. When its breathing quickened, the Bedouins knew it was time to rest. Long before danger struck. It wasn't laziness, it was precision. They had learned that in the desert, survival doesn't belong to those who rush, but to those who wait. Food and water engineering. In the desert, food isn't about flavor, it's about survival. Every bite, every sip, every crumb has to count. There's no fridge, no faucet, no backup plan. You eat what you can carry. And every choice could mean the difference between strength and collapse. The Bedouins didn't eat much, but they ate smart. Their diet was minimal, yet perfectly engineered for endurance. Dates were the foundation, small, lightweight, and packed with carbs, fiber, and minerals. They were nature's energy bar, lasting for weeks without spoiling. Add milk from camels or goats, and you had the complete meal: energy, hydration, and even natural antiseptics to keep the body clean. Together, dates and milk gave them the strength to walk for miles under a sun that melted everything else. Then came fat, butter or milk fat, dense in calories but slow to digest. It didn't overheat the body or demand much water for digestion. In a place where sweat could cost you your life, that mattered more than taste. The golden rule was simple: don't eat what makes you thirsty. No salty food, no heavy soups, no steaming dishes, just small portions, high in energy, light on water use. And when it came to drinking, the Bedouins were masters of control. They never gulped water. They took tiny sips, just enough to moisten the mouth and trick the body into calm. Drinking too much at once only made you sweat more. And sweat was life leaving the body. Their water was stored in goatskin bags called burdux. At first glance, they looked primitive, but they worked like portable coolers. Tiny pores in the skin let air pass through, letting a thin layer of water evaporate from the outside. That evaporation cooled what was inside, sometimes by more than 10 degrees. Even food and medicine were buried in sand, stored just beneath the surface, where the temperature dropped by half, the desert's own natural fridge. If water ran low, they switched to milk. If food ran low, they skipped meals, but never wasted a drop of moisture. And when everything ran out, they stayed still. Because in the desert, moving burns water faster than hunger does. Their diet wasn't about luxury. It was about logic, a perfect balance between energy, hydration, and heat control. But the Bedouins didn't stop there. They went even deeper, mastering the one thing no one else could: the human body itself. Their survival depended on turning their own biology into a cooling system, the human cooling system. For the Bedouins, surviving the desert wasn't just about smart clothing or clever shelters. It was about mastering themselves. Their own bodies became the last line of defense, finely tuned machines built for balance, not battle. Rule number 1: never sit directly on the sand. Even in the shade, that golden surface traps heat like a stove. So they always sat on rugs, animal skins, or folded cloth, a small barrier that could mean the difference between comfort and collapse. Rule number 2: never chase shade. Create it. If there were no rocks or trees, they became their own shelter, crouching low, wrapping their robes tight, leaving only a thin gap for air. Inside that small fabric cocoon, it was often cooler than the world outside. Every movement mattered. They never rushed, never swung their arms or walked fast, because every sudden motion forced the heart to pump harder, pushing out precious moisture through sweat. So they moved slow, steady, and deliberate. Every step calculated. Their posture was upright, their breathing controlled. No panting, no open-mouth gasps. All air passed through the nose, filtered, cooled, and preserved. Some trained themselves to walk in silence, holding their breath between steps, their bodies almost meditating while moving. They even knew how to cool their bodies using only a few drops of water if they were overheating. They didn't pour water over their heads. That would waste it. They targeted the wrists, the neck, and the face, places rich with blood vessels. Cooling those zones cooled the whole body. And through all of it, they stayed calm. Because panic is the desert's deadliest poison. Fear makes the heart race. The faster the heart beats, the more water you lose. So they trained not just their bodies, but their minds. Calm wasn't weakness, it was control. In the desert, stillness wasn't laziness, it was survival. The Bedouins learned what most people never do. You can't outmuscle nature. You can only outthink it. To the Bedouin, the sun, the sand, and the wind weren't enemies, they were signals, and the ones who lived longest were those who listened the closest, the forgotten science. The Bedouins never tried to conquer the desert. They didn't build walls to hide from it, or machines to fight it. They learned its rhythm, and then they became part of it. They wore the heat, breathed the wind, and walked across burning earth as if it were their home. Because it was. Every movement, every habit, every piece of their life was precision. A science born, not in labs, but in survival. And what's wild is that modern research is only now beginning to understand what they mastered centuries ago. Loose black robes that cool the body, tents that adjust to humidity, hydration habits that waste nothing, body control techniques that lower heat without a single tool. We call it ancient wisdom. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's the kind of knowledge we'll need again, as the planet grows hotter, drier, and less forgiving. The Bedouins didn't fear the desert. They respected it, and in return, it taught them something timeless. That survival isn't about power. It's about patience, awareness, and balance. Because in the end, the desert only destroys those who fight it. The Bedouins? They learned to disappear into it. If this story made you see the desert, or the Bedouins, in a new light, imagine how much more there is out there that we've forgotten. History isn't just in books. It's in the lives of people who mastered the impossible. So if you love uncovering hidden knowledge and forgotten survival secrets like this, don't just scroll away. Stay curious. Hit subscribe and join us as we dig into more stories of human brilliance, mystery, and resilience. Because sometimes the greatest innovations don't come from technology. They come from those who learned how to live when no one else could.